These four teams are on the radar of making the college football playoff in 2026. But are they going to be able to survive some of the hardest schedules this upcoming season? I'm going to break down if Oklahoma, Texas, Ohio State, and USC have what it takes to make it through their schedules and to have a strong season and reach their win totals. All right, as I stated, the point of today's video is discussing if these four teams that are in the top 20 of strength of schedule on ESPN are capable of hitting their win totals for the upcoming year, despite having such a challenging upcoming schedule. I'm going to start things off with Oklahoma. I have referenced a lot this offseason on this channel, on other channels, that I think that Oklahoma has what it takes to maybe win the SEC, to be a college football playoff team, to win 10 games. And discovering that they had a 7.5 win total was pretty shocking to me because I love everything about this Oklahoma roster. Their defense is loaded. John Mateer seems to be focusing on his body after he was dinged up last year, and there is an opportunity for growth across the board after they reached the college football playoff with a hard schedule last season. Right now on ESPN, they have the number 2 strength of schedule for this upcoming year, which is going to be a massive challenge for this Oklahoma team. It is going to be really tough for them to get through this schedule. But despite that, I think that last season, having such a hard path, they proved that Brent Venables has what it takes as a head coach to get through a really difficult stretch. But to be more deliberate, let's take a look at some of the matchups that might prevent them from hitting that 7.5 win total. To me, this feels like an ultimate no-brainer that they end up hitting 7.5 because I don't see enough games on their schedule that are like really hard to make the case that they win. There's 3 games that I see as possible losses. I think that Texas and Georgia are going to be really hard outs. They have the potential to win them. I don't think that they're insurmountable opponents, but I think that those 2 games are potential losses. And the same thing goes for Ole Miss. I think that Oklahoma is going to beat Ole Miss, but theoretically, let's just say in this world, they end up losing that game, they lose 3 games. The remaining tough games on their schedule that at least stood out to me, the rest of the games didn't seem hard to me. Michigan, Texas A&M, Florida, South Carolina. I ultimately think all 4 of those games, Oklahoma has an edge. Michigan this can be early on in the season, coming off of all the distractions from the offseason. Bryce Underwood is still developing and trying to figure things out. Way too soon for them to be ready to go up against that Oklahoma defense. Texas A&M has a ton of turnover along their offensive line. 2 new coordinators. I do not trust Texas A&M to be able to keep Marcel Reed upright against a unit like that. That is a perfect spot for Brent Venables to outcoach Texas A&M and to win that game, even if it's low scoring. Florida, first year under John Summerall, and I understand that there's a chance that Florida ends up being plucky and capable of pulling off an upset. I don't think that Florida is fully equipped and ready with, frankly, the lack of confidence that I have in their quarterback room, if it's Philo or it's Tramel Jones, to challenge this Oklahoma team. And then lastly, South Carolina would be the only of these 4 that I actually would feel challenged by if I was Oklahoma. But as much as I think that South Carolina bounces back and responds this year, I don't feel so secure about their offensive line. Again, this all comes down to offensive lines being able to block this front 7 that Oklahoma has. I don't think that they're going to be able to slow down the front 7 that Oklahoma has and to protect Lenore Sellers enough to win a game like this. So for that first one, I think that Oklahoma absolutely hits on the over on 7.5. Next up, Texas has the number 3 strength of schedule, and their projected win total is 9.5. Now, this is a little bit of a harder number for them to hit than what we just discussed with Oklahoma, and they actually have some tougher matchups ahead of them than Oklahoma, which is kind of interesting that per ESPN's strength of schedule, where they sit that Texas is 3 and Oklahoma is 2. These are games that I identified as possible losses for this Texas team. Ohio State, Oklahoma, Ole Miss, LSU. I think that ultimately they will beat Ohio State because it's week 2. Ohio State is trying to navigate the replacements along their defense. That is going to be a really tough task, and you have to deal with an elite receiver tandem with Ryan Wingo and Cam Coleman, and Arch Manning being as confident as he is. I think that they beat Oklahoma, but that is certainly a game that they potentially could lose, and Oklahoma gets revenge for a season ago. Even if we call that one a coin flip, that factors into a possible loss for this team. I think that Ole Miss and LSU are wins, but are certainly chances for them to get knocked off, which would push them towards having an 8-win season. I don't really know if I can trust Ole Miss's defense to be capable enough to slow down Texas with all of the new guys that they had to bring in to replace all of their departures. I think Ole Miss will win 9 games this year, but I think that this is a potential likely loss for the Rebels because, again, you're asking for them to operate cohesively with so many transfer portal players. It just gives me a lot of uncertainty. And the same exact thing here applies for LSU. Same exact analysis. I think LSU is a 9-3 team. I think that there's just too many new faces for them to win a game like this with a national title contender in Texas that they're squaring off with. That being said, the games that are hard on their schedule that I think that they win, I think that they beat Tennessee with the uncertainty with their quarterback circumstance. I think that they beat Florida first year, John Summerall. We just talked about this with Oklahoma. And the same thing with Texas A&M that I discussed earlier. I think that that defensive line is going to be too much for the revamped Texas A&M offensive line. Now let's talk about Ohio State, who has the number 8 strength of schedule in the country. Their projected win total is 9.5. They really do have a hard schedule. They have the hardest schedule in the Big Ten for this upcoming year of any of the contenders. Possible losses for them include Texas, USC, Indiana, and Oregon. I don't fully doubt Ohio State in the way that they're being doubted, where they've got a lot of replacements on defense. I think they're going to figure it out and they're going to respond and they're going to ultimately be fine. But there's a possibility, as I mentioned earlier, I think that they lose to Texas because it's week 2. It is really, really hard to respond to all these new guys coming into the fold. I know that you did it last year, but that was dealing with a Texas team that was undergoing their own transformation and adjustments with a lot of new dudes that were stepping in for their squad. So that's going to be a little bit tougher this time around. I think that they ultimately end up beating USC and Indiana, and where I think a loss probably comes into play is Oregon. I think that the margins are a lot thinner here for Ohio State, but I do see a world where they end up going 10-2. Beating USC and Indiana are accomplishable because margins are not thin, but Ohio State's better than I think both the squads. Indiana, of course, could pull that thing out, as we saw them do it in the Big Ten championship game when people are doubting them. But Oregon is that one potential spot where they have a really difficult stretch of games that features USC, Indiana, and then Oregon last, where they could potentially drop that. And then the one other tough game on the schedule is Michigan, and I just don't trust Michigan in discussions in any of these top games. It's going to be a distraction-filled season potentially in the first year under Kyle Whittingham. Lastly, USC has the 19th strength of schedule. They have a projected win total of 8.5 wins, and I think that they're going to get that. I think that they are going to win 10 games this year, and they're one of my picks to get to the college football playoff. I like everything that Lincoln Riley's got coming into the season. So potential losses for them. I don't think that they're going to beat Oregon, and I don't think that they're going to beat Ohio State. I think that they're going to steal this Indiana game because there's going to be ultimately a lot of desperation that ties to that they're going to need to win that to get to the college football playoff. Washington is an interesting one because there is a theoretical world where Washington ends up being better than some people expect. And Damon Williams is the type of guy that pops off with a couple of big plays and wins a game purely by putting the team on his back. But I think that USC has what it takes to at least win 2 of those. But in the world of them hitting their win total of winning at least 9 games, if they go 1-3 against those opponents, it's not an insurmountable accomplishment. They do play Penn State. That was the only other tough game that I identified, but I'm out on Penn State. I am so out on Penn State. I don't think that this is some Curt Cignetti type team that has an easy schedule that gets to the college football playoff. I'm not buying it until I see it. I think it's a tougher transition. Cignetti won at a much higher level than Matt Campbell ever did when he was at Iowa State. We'll see what happens. Comment below if you agree with me, disagree with me on any of these win totals with these tough schedules coming up for this season. I'll talk to you later.